Great. Thank you for the opportunity to present our work on distinguishing voluntary and involuntary blinks through eye openness metrics. This work was made possible with the contribution of Mr. Minas, Mr. Calvo-Córdoba, and Professor Xenos, of course. My name is Konstantinos Roumpas, and I am the lead author of this paper, and we'll walk through together what eye openness is and how we can use it to distinguish voluntary and involuntary blinks and why it is important. So this project is co-funded by the EPIC project, where we aim to improve pilot interfaces and interactions on cockpits. So we came across this problem particularly where a pilot was under a challenging situation where they would be expected to perform multiple actions at once. However, can you imagine managing the whole cockpit with just your only two hands? You could only do so much, obviously. So we try to use another input, which was through gaze data. But of course, even in gaze data, we have the Midas problem, where when you look at something, you might not necessarily want to use this as an input. So a very natural way that you can interact with your gaze is through blinking. But of course, blinking has the same problem. There are natural ways that you can blink, and you might want to filter these out. So this is what this research is. This research focuses on solving problems while offering a solution that can be implemented in any instance, granting that there is an eye tracking device to capture the user's eye openness. But what is eye openness, and why did we focus it on so much? Eye openness is a measurement of the millimeters between the two eyelids, and where past research has been focusing on using eye images to determine whether it was a blink or the existence or not of eye tracking data, in the sense that lacking eye tracking data would mean that the eyes are closed. Both of these methods have their own merits, but also their limitations. And what we got from that is a very solid bibliographic support. We know how we categorize them, voluntary and involuntary blinks, and we also get some insights on what a blink is. It's not just when the eyes are closed, but it's the whole movement from the starting relaxing eye position to closing it, to reopen it back again. For the purposes of our study, 44 participants were recruited from the university, 2 of whom participated in the pilot study. Consent was obtained from the participants in accordance to the General Data Protection Regulation, and participants were given the option to withdraw from the experiment at any point. The purpose of the experiment was not explicitly made clear to the participants beforehand, as blinking as a process is a subconscious reflex from the central nervous system and can thus be affected by participant being conscious about it. Instead, the participants were told that they would try out the eye tracker. The participants were then informed about the purpose of the experiment afterwards, and the reason for not disclosing the information was also discussed. We collected eye openness data in a controlled lab condition where each participant would participate in 2 conditions. The first one would involve them performing a simple calibration process on a screen with a black background contrasting with the calibration points to facilitate the detection and accuracy of the movements. In this stage, the involuntary blinks would be measured, since the participants would not know at this point that we are focusing on their blinking patterns. The second condition took place immediately after, where the participants were instructed to perform the same task, but blink each time a new calibration point came onto the screen. The eye tracker was used the Tobii Pro Spectrum with a sampling rate of 3000 Hertz, so 30 samples per second. We explained to the participants the calibration process and its use for our experiment, and then proceeded with the calibration. If the calibration was not successful or the data loss was too big, the calibration took place again, even though we didn't really need the calibration data. For the calibration to take place, the subject needed to be sitting around 55 to 75 centimeters away from the screen so that the eye tracker could actually track them. An important decision was whether we should examine whether we could replicate the results from previous studies when it comes to the duration of voluntary blinks and involuntary blinks. And during the experimental phase, it became evident that the participants were voluntarily blinking during the calibration process in the non-blink condition and vice versa. Consequently, we decided to build above the thresholds established in previous studies to distinguish voluntary blinks from involuntary ones. And to validate this decision, we conducted a t-test comparing voluntary blinks and involuntary blinks within the non-blink condition. The results revealed a highly significant difference between the two groups, with a t-statistic of 13.84, and this exceptionally large value confirms the validity of the thresholds determined in prior studies, demonstrating that they align well with our dataset and can reliably characterize blinks in our model development. The overall density of blink durations for voluntary and involuntary blinks is depicted in this figure, and in it we observe two distinct regions between the two blink types. A single widened peak of longer blink durations is observed, which is indicative of the intentional and controlled nature of the voluntary blinks. And in contrast, the distribution of involuntary blinks is characterized by two distinct peaks, which are considered to belong to the same group, even after the dataset was updated to incorporate a refined classification based on cluster analysis. Um, these dual peaks are taken to suggest the heterogeneity within the involuntary blink category, potentially reflecting variations in natural blink dynamics. And this complexity in characterizing involuntary blinks is highlighted and calls for future research to determine whether these peaks are caused for physiological factors, experimental conditions, or other influences. Nevertheless, a robust foundation for training models to differentiate between voluntary and involuntary blinks is provided by the refined dataset and updated classification thresholds. Using our data, we created the blink classification model, which represents a trained neural network designed to classify blinks as either involuntary or voluntary, based on features such as blink duration, eye openness signals. The dataset that was preprocessed to ensure data quality by removing missing values and standardizing feature scales. The model is a feed-forward neural network that receives data from eye openness signals. The input data consisted of flattened feature vectors obtained from eye openness measurements over time, specifically the blink duration and the vectors obtained from eye openness measurements. This was done because for the duration of a blink, the eye tracker would record many different eye openness levels or values, and they were then normalized to improve convergence. There were no other features included to preserve the aerodynamics of the blink motion. So we can see in the input layer, the input features, the blink duration, the mean eye openness level for the left eye, for the right eye, the standard deviation for the eye openness of the left eye and the right eye as well. Then a dense layer with 64 units follows with ReLU activation, and then a dropout layer, which is indicated by the faded points. And then another 34 dense layer with another 30% dropout layer. And then finally, the two remaining, the output layer with the two output choices, voluntary blink or involuntary blink. This is the confusion matrix, which showcases the accuracy basically of our model. Whoever is quick at math can understand that we had a 92% accuracy during validation, which marks an improvement upon previous work because previous work could only reach up to 90%. It's not a competition, but it shows how eye openness as a metric is effective and can be used to great extent to determine blinks, whether they're voluntary or involuntary, or they're blinking itself. Thank you. I will leave you with the Eye of the Devil, a picture that I took in Konstantinos recently. The eye openness of it would be about 13 meters, I think. I don't remember that well. But yeah, thank you for this. This was a very important study for us, so we can continue with creating applications that use
which sectors, I guess.
Yeah, one thing that we're trying to do is create an application that would require the participants to be using both hands to perform a task, but then also be in a high cognitive load situation so they can look at the screen and use their blinks as inputs. We're still figuring out the scenario right now, but we are planning to test this out and see if they have, when they have the option to also use their mouse, if it distracts them from using their hands from the other tasks that they're performing. And also we're planning to compare the model that we created with simply applying the thresholds so that you don't actually need a neural network to work with it.
That's great. Do we have another question?
Thank you. Just follow from the previous question. Good work. I like it. I don't know whether going from 90 to 92% is a big deal, but anyway, we advance this, and I'm just wondering, in a real-time situation, what you expect to define as acceptable success rate? Because I can imagine a scenario when I'm flying a very sophisticated military aircraft and I blink and shoot a missile which kills, I don't know, 1,000 people. And I wouldn't be able to say, sorry, it was just a blink, an involuntary blink. So there is a cost associated to certain actions. So 92% might sound really high, but the rest, 80% might have an associated cost that we cannot afford. So that's the first question. The second one relates to the latency. Now, you are training with data, historic data of blinking. Now, in real life, you have to classify then. So you need, after the blink has been completed, to process through the neural network, define on the class, and take action. So what is the time you expect to have, and what is the time frame which should be compared to pressing a button? Okay, so have you thought about this? Because this is the next steps, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the questions. I think I can answer them both by saying that, first of all, we're not planning on using this to shoot missiles at anyone. These are obviously supposed to be for more minor tasks. One thing that we are thinking about is confirming that the pilot actually saw a notification, and by blinking towards it, he or she could ignore it. Yeah. So this is a task that doesn't warrant immediate action, so the latency wouldn't be exactly relevant. But there shouldn't be any latency if we use simply the thresholds of 0.4 milliseconds that you need to measure whether the blink was voluntary or involuntary. I don't know for the neural network if it's going to be a higher latency. I assume it would be, but it's still on a testing phase, so we should see about that.
And for elevating the percentage, even by 2%, I think it's huge. I would like to ask if emotion could throw off the accuracy results, because I guess when you're stressed, you blink more often. If you're alert, the eye openness lasts longer, I suppose. Have you taken that into account or plan to do so, even for the minor task you're going to use it for?
That's an interesting point. We haven't considered that, but from what I've seen, there haven't been anyone who determined that when you're stressed, you blink in a higher duration, just in a higher blink count, as I say. So yeah, it's definitely something that we should work on and take into consideration. But yeah, as of right now, this is just it.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.